So welcome to today's episode of The Pursuit of Excellence. Today I have a very special guest, Chris Van Dusen. And so rather than reading off his very robust bio, because he is one of the senior partners at Selo, and he is also the chief growth officer, as well as founder who has exited 3 businesses through acquisition. He's also done a whole bunch of other things. So Chris, welcome to the show. I'd love for you to share who you are and what you do exactly.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. This is a great experience, and so I really appreciate it. Yeah, so as you said, Chris Van Dusen, I'm one of the partners at Selo Capital. I wasn't always kind of in finance. I was early in my career, then jumped out of it for a while to be an operator, and now back. But, I played athletics in college, played baseball fairly high level, played in college at William & Mary, and then had the opportunity to go on the real estate investment banking side, which I enjoyed. Worked for a boutique firm out of Richmond for a few years. And then I had the opportunity to come to California at the end of 2009.
Wild year.
We'll
wild year to get out to Cali.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're doing mezz debt growth and income funds against real estate. That was a fun 2007, 8, and 9. But I digress. Company I came out for, they did a restructuring. And so I like to say I was restructured out. So I became this, accidental or forced entrepreneur. Okay. Right. So I have this economics background mixed with some finance and ended up starting a marketing and media company that we grew to a great size, and then had the opportunity to found a few companies. One of the best, I think, opportunities was in the world that I floated in kind of marketing was all around conversion rate optimization, high intent media buying. So you have this opportunity to get in the weeds with your clients to understand sales, unit costs, contribution margins, all this, right? Things that certainly I liked and were more important to me than just the flashy advertising side. And so we scaled a lot of companies, met these 5 guys, had the opportunity to start what ended up being one of the largest CBD brands in the world that we sold in 2021. I was the chief growth officer for them. We scaled that business up quite fast, which was amazing. So I was going back and forth to Denver for a while. And at the same time, I co-founded a liquor distillery with my wife and 2 others. And we sold that in 21. And then I always make this joke, but we also sold a beauty care brand in 2019.
I love it.
Passion of mine, right? And then I had raised a couple funds in the cannabis space. So, I was kind of always floating in this area around doing diligence, making investments, scaling companies, right? Building a network to help these companies, right, get to where they need to go. In January 22, I had the opportunity to join Selo as a senior partner. I've known John, the founder, since he started the firm in 17. We've always wanted to work together, so it's been an amazing opportunity. And being at Selo is fantastic. They, as a firm, I say we take things very differently and look at things very differently, right? So, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole and make this an advertorial, but when you look at Selo, we're a private investment firm, right? So I make the joke, what does that mean? And the whole point is it means nothing. But if I tell you we do venture, you're going to look at that and you're going to anchor in venture. If I say private equity, same, private credit. We build capital strategies for family offices around, different opportunities. So we've deployed quite a lot of capital within the growth equity space. We do some standard PE. We have a couple real estate projects in market, private credit. But really the backbone of our firm, which makes us different, is we have a quite large team of what we call Selo advisors that we get to go in and help drive growth and value during that formidable kind of growth equity stage. And so it's been a great experience to be part of that team.
I love it. So I'm also biased. I really enjoy Selo Capital as well as part of our suite of offerings and partnerships. So the thing that I've noticed about Selo that really differentiates is also what your key role is the roll up your sleeves and get in the weeds with every organization that you're bringing to the table. So talk to me about what that looks like, especially because the suite of operators that you've brought in have a unique background as well. And so, growing up, I grew up in Coronado, which is very heavily like Navy SEAL military based, growing up with elite athletics. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that psychology and objective when you're talking about the CMO side of the get in the weeds and roll your sleeves up, getting dirty.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would speak for a lot of the other members, both at the partner and team level, when I say, when you've done a few transactions and you've gone full cycle, you have those battle scars, right? And so there's a piece of, I look back at the times that I was growing companies and having someone help me, not just at the board level, but like be that sounding board to get in the weeds to help is a huge piece that I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs really get. They may take capital from an outside investor who is there quarterly to, I don't want to say judge them, but certainly pick apart how it's growing and what it's doing. And by the way, there's a role for that. But for us, we thought, it's a lot different when we can sit in there. We can put teams on secondment, right? Their second job is to help those companies grow. And why I say that is there are a lot of companies when they are raising capital, especially in like the A round side, that don't have fully baked executive teams, do not have fully baked, finance or strategy teams. And we're able to take very different experiences, right? Mine and consumer packaged goods and high scale, digitally first or digitally native vertical brands to market, right? I can help these companies. So, in our portfolio, I'm on one of our investments is a company called Don't Quit, right? It's basically a protein soda, amazing company. But for me, that's one that I originated, but also I saw the vision for because I've worked in that world and why they were so different.
They have a great track record too. It's wild what's happening in the modern soda brand space. So it's fun to watch as it evolves.
They're killing it.
But yeah, keep going. Sorry.
They're killing it. And then for me, right, being an ex-athlete and having a lot of, friends that either still play or are coaching or maybe even team owners, I get a lot of deal flow in sports. And so, I won't say I've become known for that, but kind of have become known for being the guy in sports, right? And so I get to bring that perspective. But to that same point, you look across the other partners we have in the firm, they have very unique perspectives they can bring. And so they're able to jump in and really help these companies grow. And certainly, and I talk about this a lot, I love investing in athletes. I love investing in people who have done something exceptional outside of business because they're going to carry that mindset. They're going to carry that grit, determination, resilience into that next thing.
I love that.
Right. And, when I look at it, my perfect mix would be an ex-athlete who's a second-time founder. Because they've also already gone
battle
through
tested.
what it means to go through the cycle.
They've been rode hard, put away wet, as my dad likes to say. They've seen a few things. Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. And so, the culture at Selo is one that looks at providing excellence, right? Making hard things more streamlined and simple and being able to execute. And I think great athletes, great operators from the military as well, kind of make that mix for us. And so, add that to really well-seasoned either corporate execs or former founders like myself. And you've got a great mix of perspective and a great mix of work ethic and grit to go really help these companies grow. Because that's really what we're in this for, right? Is to help them.
So what is
grow.
The objective? Like when you get in, what is the overall strategy to align the stars and then figure out, are you maximizing growth? Are we scaling as quickly as possible? What is it that you take an approach to baseline and then establish the growth trajectory for?
Yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. There are many companies that we look at that we say, okay, they have a large enough kind of total addressable market. We believe in the vision. We believe in the strategy. They need this amount of capital, growth capital to execute on that. And so that could be a 5-year run, right? Typically, we're underwriting that to be in that 5-year mark, that they're going to grow to a quantum that meets our underwriting and that meets the type of return that our investors are looking for. And so, as we play with that, it's understanding, is this something that's going to be a 2-year, a 3-year, or, quite possibly a 10? And then how does that match what we're looking at doing on whether or not we're doing this as a standalone deal for investors we know that like it, or if we're doing this as a portfolio of deals that we're going to put together, right? Feeling like a fund, meaning there's 13 companies that are all in a product, but they all have kind of similar or defined entry and exit points as we see them on an underwriting basis. So it's totally different. Traditionally, where we want to get in, and we've done seed through I call it, right? But traditionally, when we want to get in, is where there's still a fair valuation naturally, but we see a ton of upside and it's right around the corner, and we need to provide that capital to go execute on that. And sometimes that expertise as well to help them really, nail the contracts, nail the distribution, nail whatever it may be, right? Optimizing
Very
internally.
cool. As far as the trend with AI, a lot of conversations that I'm having within the founder communities is, one, how are they utilizing it? Two, the companies that are product specific with AI versus process focused, what are you seeing as far as the optimization of the valuation or growth and scale when it comes to AI in general?
That is a very big and hairy question.
Wherever you want to start unloading that one.
Yeah, I mean, it is It is, I don't want to say all the
Yeah.
craze right now, but it truly is. And it is redefining how investments are getting done. It's redefining how companies scale. You know, there's great stories you can go through of, you know, if a company like Stripe was to be created today, what would their
Oh, that would be
OpEx and CapEx
interesting.
truly look like as compared to, you know, the billions they raised to get there. So it's fundamentally changing from a process perspective. As an investor, I think the tough part that I don't want to say wrestle with is if you go back to some of these, dare I say, bubbles, because I don't want to call AI a full bubble yet, but these bubbles, there are a ton of winners and a ton of losers. And so how do you make that appropriate decision? Our strategy very much as a firm is to find great deals, right? We sometimes use the joke, we like to be truffle pigs, right? Go find amazing deals we can bring to our investors, different than going and raising $1 billion fund and making 20, 30, 40 different plays and playing portfolio theory. And so the quick on portfolio theory being, I know this percentage are going to hit a home run, this percentage are going to fail to zero. These will be some doubles or some singles and doubles. And that's going to get me my IRR, right? We look at it and say, what do we believe in? Where can we find a company that does that? And then how can we match that with great capital to help scale? And so for us, you know, we have a couple AI plays. I won't call them pure plays. They're not the open AIs of the world or Anthropics, but they are doing something really unique and dare I say even practical in the space, right? There's a practical use for it. And so for us, those are the type of bets we believe sit outside of the stack of, you know, LLMs and then what I call middleware that sits on top, right? Someone made a great company that's just utilizing some other LLM. And, you know, you could make an analogy to the App Store that's been happening for years, but you don't know which ones are going to be winners and losers in that, or which products that are middleware truly are just features that haven't been built by the underlying LLMs yet.
Yeah.
And that's a worry.
That's really
right?
interesting.
So is it picture generation, video generation? Is it, you know, is it something they just haven't hit their roadmap yet? Because you've seen a lot of the large ones, right? The big three come out with features that 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, other companies built to sit on top of, and now it's embedded native inside. And so you're trying to figure out which one's going to do it. This was a long answer and windy, but the point is, we really look at things on a case-by-case basis, you know, but I think we're more conservative on trying to understand how this is going to be used very differently. Is it, you know, a pure play in healthcare? Okay, there's a market for that. Or is it just something that's built on top?
No, I mean, AI is just revolutionizing. So it's very curious with the companies that end up failing when they're specifically product focused, like you're saying. They need to be built into the native formula. But really interesting. Do you want to talk about AI.io at all?
I can talk a little bit about it. Yeah, we're really excited about it. We invested back in 24. Their practical use of AI, as I mentioned, for scouting and player development. And so what does that mean, right? Let's take European football or soccer as we call it here, right? I used to have a very US-centric view on sports, right? I played sports. I don't watch a lot of international sports. I was never a huge European football fan. However, I reserve the right to get smarter. And what I realized was, you know, starting as early as I think 12, children are getting signed to developmental programs for some of these Champions League, Premier League teams. And so that can be in Europe, that can be really anywhere. And you're seeing the MLS do the same. And so you start looking at the total amount of kids that need to be scouted. You know, a scout can see about 2,000 a year, maybe. And so you start realizing that it's a very narrow vein to get scouted in any meaningful way. A lot of times players will upload themselves doing videos, send them directly to the scouts. Scouts have to sift through them, right? It's all a lot of friction. This was built to kind of remove or democratize scouting. And so I like starting from the marketing view, as we've talked about. But let's say something along the lines of Nike invites you to be the next striker at Chelsea. I love that line, right? You can be anywhere in the world. As long as you have a mobile phone, you download the app, AI Scout, you upload yourself doing specific drills. And then it's able to grade that against players in the program, others, individuals, because you've built an entire data lake of more and more of these individuals doing these drills. So not only does it tell you how well or how good you are comparatively, it'll then give you the things that need to be developed and whether or not those are things that can be developed or not, right? Like you look at me doing a soccer drill, and you look at a great, probably 12-year-old, and they're going to say that 12-year-old has a lot more potential than I do, right?
It's,
And that's okay.
I'm sorry, my brain, so obviously I'm getting older, so I'm not going to age myself today. But I played Olympic development soccer. And so in order to get into that, like at that time I was getting scouted, I was, you know, getting letters from colleges. If we had had that technology 30 years ago,
Yeah.
Like that would have been wild. One, just to understand where you actually sit as far as skill and talent and potential. But two, it's like really understanding
Hmm.
the because I mean I was already doing elite, all the different accessory stuff that you need to do to get to that level.
Yep.
So really dialing in the training program. Wow. I didn't realize. Okay, sorry, keep going. Fascinating.
No, it's fascinating. And
Yeah.
then obviously the player development is once
Yeah.
you're in the developmental program, there are labs built to help continually to assess and get better, right? So great use of it. The technology was, was developed at Intel and then brought over. So it really is just a fantastic company who's got great things coming up over the next year or so.
Given that you have literally built so many brands and you have access to the due diligence deal teams on so many different levels, I'd love to understand, because the rooms I'm in with founders that are growing and scaling, that are looking at capitalizing at some point or exiting, what exactly makes a brand attractive outside of EBITDA?
Yeah. Okay. So I'd look at that question and say, how do we handle
Mhm.
diligence in a meaningful way? And our approach, I still believe to this day, is a lot different. Now, you have a different haircut, as I'll call them, sitting in my seat. They're going to tell you their process is different as well. And I think that's great, whatever it ends up being. But it really is an art and a science. So to your point, when you look at the EBITDA side of the world, and forecasts and all that, that's really the science and saying, is there enough meat here? Is this meaningful? Is it reasonable what you're trying to do? Right. And not reasonable from a vision. Is it reasonable to think in this amount of time or by this strategy, you're going to achieve that? Right. That's one. But then there's the art of the humans involved. And I think that becomes one of the bigger pieces. So I mentioned earlier, I love second time founders because they've been through it. I also love athletes because I know they have the fortitude, right? And by the way, I shouldn't say athletes as a global acceptance of that you played the sports. It's the mentality of high level athletes, right? Matched with the resilience to actually go get this job done and the smarts to do it. But with that said, there are a lot of times that founder infighting, if you have a co-founder, can harm companies more than anything else. And so, we're really slow as a firm to make commitments until we like to ladder in, meaning make multiple investments over time instead of just a large chunk or large funding. And part of that reason is watching and seeing you do the things you say. And it's not a trust issue, it's an execution issue. And so as we look at it, and certainly I do as I'm doing my initial diligence, is once you're done doing your dog and pony because you need capital, like who are you at that point, right? Because I think every founder should have a little PT Barnum in them, right? And there's this piece of while you're doing that show, you could be on top of the world, but then what happens next? And so trying to create situations, and I use these as kind of small examples, but take them out to lunch, take them out for coffee, take them out for a drink if they so desire. If you play golf, go play 9 holes. See them in an element that isn't them pitching you for that capital. And I think you start to learn a lot. Ask them questions about their co-founder, ask them questions about the team, ask them questions about, start to really pick on the words that are being used outside of let's go through this 10 to 15 slide deck before you get access to the data room, because everyone can practice
it's really interesting because we go through the same process when we're looking at clients for comprehensive planning, because it's like we need to know the whole scope of, I call it the whole enchilada. We need to see the big picture plan, and we also want to make sure that the client's going to work just as hard with us to make sure that execution happens. Does it make sense unless we're hand in hand on the execution phase? I've seen a bunch of due diligence done, and it's always really fascinating to me. I always like to say it's like picking the right jockey. You're betting on the right horse, but it's really the jockey,
Exactly.
I love it.
Well said.
Mindset wise, right? I call the show The Pursuit of Excellence, right? So I always like to, you've talked about athletics a lot. How do I know you play, or practice is the right word, jujitsu. I've played so many different sports in my career. I grew up trying to do karate. So I learned, I can't remember what belt I was at one point, but I'd love to know your mindset on how you implement jujitsu in your life, or how important it is that those founders do have some sort of athletic practice, not just the mindset.
Yeah. I'll kind of unpack jujitsu for a minute. It's probably the greatest blessing I discovered. And I always thank a buddy of mine who introduced me to it. I was 36. Wow. Yeah, 36. I had a 1-year-old, right? tough pregnancy for me. Naturally, I put on a bunch of weight. Just kidding. I did, but also. And so I didn't want to do it. You know, back in high school as captain of the wrestling team, the idea of spending time on a mat again, I knew exactly what it entailed, and it was not exciting to me. Hence why things had happened. But I showed up and fell absolutely madly in love with the art of jiu-jitsu. And it has, arguably in my mind, one of the worst value propositions. Okay. Because for a long time, you're going to get up, say as an adult, and go train for an hour and a half, and you're not going to know how to defend yourself. And you're going to be flailing around, trying really hard to not die.
It's
and
true.
I kid, but
I can imagine.
you're going to feel like you are from a cardio perspective. And someone is literally trying to impose their will and harm you in some way to get you to say stop. Right. So let's just call a spade here. And so for quite a while, you're not going to be able to do anything. You're going to realize from an ego and humility perspective that you are incapable of doing anything.
Humbling.
And that is something. And then you're going to learn a little bit more, and you're going to learn how to defend, and you learn how to attack a little, and then you're going to learn. And by the way, not just by going to class, by actually doing it, because it's the only martial art that you can train at 100% speed, if you will, always. Right? If I'm going to throw a punch in Muay Thai or boxing, you can't tap before you get hit. Yeah. You're going to feel that. But with jiu-jitsu, you are full on grappling. And so from a cardio perspective, it's great. From a mindset perspective, we just covered your getting the crud beat out of you, and you've got to get over your ego. And then every day it's different. Every day, someone very smart said this, some days you're the hammer and some days you're the nail, and you don't know when you show up. And it's subjective because it's not about just doing forms and katas. It is about how well you do around the people who are your same, maybe, you know, the belt before or the belt above, and how you are putting that practice together. So on average, it takes, 10 plus years to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu, which is its own thing, right? So think about that journey of staying healthy and committed and doing it 3 to 4 days a week to get to that place where you're at a proficiency level. So let's unpack what I just went through for a second. And I love making the corollary to the entrepreneurial journey, because when you start a company, you don't know, and everyone's telling you you're not going to, and you're getting beat up. Like, can you show up with the same type of grit and resilience to keep saying, no, I have vision and I'm going to keep showing up? So that's one thing, right? Every day showing up for something that may or may not be beating you up is its own level of stuff. Then you have the fortitude to stick with it. Most people who start jiu-jitsu, the largest fail rate is when they get their blue belt, and it goes white, blue, purple, brown, black, because they know enough that they can do whatever they want to their buddies, but not enough to truly defend themselves from a skilled player, right? But against someone who knows nothing, they're going to be extremely proficient, right? With that level of knowledge. So they're like, well, I'm good. I'm done. I don't want to have to subject myself. And that's usually 2 years into your journey. So you've been training for 2 years and you're like, I'm out. Typically, once you make it to purple belt, you stick around and get it finished. Majority, if you look at the statistics. But yeah, it's this 10-year journey. And I think the same way when you're an entrepreneur, there's so many crossovers of, do you have that fortitude to keep showing up when everything around you, the environment, is making you quit, making you submit, making you say no, and having that moving forward. So for me, it was an unbelievable reminder of what I did as an athlete in my past and the extra work. And it's certainly, I train in the morning mostly. So, being able to get up and eat that frog, if you will, do that hard thing, typically makes the rest of the days a little bit easier.
Yeah. Martial arts has always been something that I have admired. My brother was a wrestler. I take the same mindset with endurance sports. So it's just we are literally paying to suffer. But the more training you put in, the less painful it is, except exactly when your body is gonna hit threshold and start bulking. So I like to equate the hills and valleys of being a founder and working with founders is just you gotta push through, otherwise you don't know exactly where the next roadblock is gonna happen. So it's just like negotiations, right? It's you gotta envision exactly what you're going to experience as far as objections, and then be able to have enough game plans and contingencies in place to maneuver around it, so that you still end up being like water. You still got to get through the brick wall. How you do it, around or over, or, under, however you want to do it, you got to get through.
Exactly.
Very cool. How close are you to your black belt then?
Oh, I got my black belt.
Okay, congratulations. So does that mean that you teach now?
Thank you.
Or you just practice? Okay.
I just practice. I travel a lot. So for me, it's tough to have any kind of predictable class. I enjoy teaching. I've done it for years off and on. Again, when I'm in town, I'll be asked to teach a little. More, it's for me getting to train as many days as I can, which again, being on the road, I train internationally when I travel, which is great. But yeah, being able to mix in an hour and a half is great. You always learn something, which is fantastic. So
it's very cool. And plus you're around such elite level mindsets anyway. So it's like, even if you are having a bad day, it's being in that environment to really put yourself in check is always, I enjoy it for myself, because you literally can't afford to bring that mindset into a space like that. Otherwise you're like lose before you even enter. So
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the big things that I enjoyed about it is, as I went through kind of the
yeah.
things that I've done in my life, the big change in 2017 when we started that CBD company, right? I had started jujitsu 6 months earlier, and I'm not saying one's related to the other necessarily, but it was one of those things where when you're doing a lot, it's really hard to stay focused. A lot of people talk about, meditative state, clear the mind, right? Big in wellness practice. For
Yeah.
me, that's a really tough thing to do. However, if someone is trying to impose their will on you, you have no choice but to be myopically
Yeah.
focused on what is happening there. And so that became my own
I
level of
love
flow
that.
state to find,
I mean,
right?
that's the truth. Yeah.
I couldn't find it in the gym. I couldn't find it running, couldn't find it,
Yeah.
doing other things, but specifically in that moment,
Yeah.
there's nothing else around you and nothing
Fascinating.
else in
So
your head.
I find it when I play soccer. I haven't played in a hot minute, but I have my
Yeah.
cleats. They're still up there. So, but I do find that I experience a flow state, just the runner's high, when I'm pushing myself past that pain threshold. However, I decided to humble myself and try a new sport last year, which is high rocks. So I'm making my pro debut at the end of March, and so I'm so excited
Amazing.
and like fired up. And so I'm doing back to back, where I'm doing pro doubles and then right into singles opens in Miami the following week. So we are doing doubles. We're dialed in. Diet is on check. This is as good as flow state as I'm going to be while managing all the client aspects of work life. But I say
Yeah.
balance, but there's like literally no balance. I preach seasons. So I'm actually curious on your mindset around it, because I like to talk about it where you have seasons of session so that you can really maximize
Mhm.
how you show up and who you're showing up for. And I know you have kiddos and wife and family. So how do you actually balance that? There is no balance, but how does that make sense for your world?
Yeah, there's a great podcaster, author, Scott Gallo, I think is how you say his last name. And he went through this. And so I want to give credit because it wasn't my original thought, but good golly, is it great, is you can have it all.
Yeah.
Just not all at once. And so, I tried to explain this concept many years before I heard that very succinct way of doing it. And I always looked at something of, take a circle, take another circle and put it inside that's 80% of the volume. And right around that circle, everything that's important to you, right? If I drag one up to the side, it has to come from somewhere else, even equally, if I want to maximize it 100. So if my family, spirituality, fitness, and work are the most important, and I move those to 100, then probably friends and, name other things haven't pulled the 40% or whatever, however you want to look at it, right? But you can have it all to your season's perspective, but trying to be 100% committed to everything it's not possible. So if you want to be the best in family and work, then probably, unfortunately, fitness, spirituality, friendships, things like that are going to start pulling away, right?
Yeah.
Hobbies,
I love how
whatever
you
it might be.
positioned that. So what does excellence actually mean to you? What is your definition of excellence?
So there's the standard definition, right, that we all could look up. But I think when you look at it, it's maximizing your human potential, right? Because your level of excellence at High Rocks is so different than my level of excellence at High Rocks. But if I operated in a capacity that was giving everything I had, maximizing, to your point, diet, preparation, all of that, and didn't hit your level, that's still excellence, right? It's my output of excellence, right? And I think that's is what's lost is we can call it the keeping up with the Joneses, but the comparative, right? Was it?
Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of joy, right? There's this level of, we as investors are going to look and find excellence to invest in. Excellent companies, excellent founders, right? But even if I made a standard deviation of all the founders I've met, they're not equal, right? And you want to find the ones that are fantastic to be able to do. But that doesn't mean that the other ones aren't still going to do great things. They just might not have met our mark for it. And so I think it's a very personal question when you look at excellence, because it is, have I lived up to what I can do to the best of my ability? Then yes, that is excellence. in my mind, right? But that might not match mine or yours
Yeah.
or
No, I
name
love
someone
that
else.
perspective. And I like to always bring people back to the concept of joy when I talk about excellence, because
Mm-hmm.
peace and joy, like, we have to be able to protect those things within the realm of like operational excellence. So just holding ourselves to that level of integrity and loyalty to keeping the promises to ourselves. So I love how you've shaped that for yourself, because everybody has a different definition.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I want to keep bringing us back to what brings us peace and joy. And like, we have to keep elevating in order to make sure that we do that.
I think one other thing I wanted to add there, and I think it's important, and you touched on a little, which is understanding and
Mhm.
standing in your own truth around your own output, right? So we have an associate at the firm. His name's Matt. He was a tier 1 special forces guy. Tells the story when you talk about excellence of their post practice runs, right? So they will do training. They train, they practice, they do everything before something that they end up going to do from a mission excellence perspective, or mission perspective, excuse me. And what I found fascinating is, call it 10 guys going to run a drill, and after they're done, they will sit and tear each other apart. Not being mean, but saying, this is what you did wrong. You have to do this better. You have to do that better. And there's an accountability that kind of crosses all of them. And then they make the joke they'll get a beer right afterwards. So you've been dressed down by your peers, and then you're able to go grab a beer, because at the end of the day, what they're trying to get is a level of kind of uncompromising excellence to do that mission critical activity. And so I don't want to get into this bigger conversation necessarily, but I think we've lost in some of our cultures corporately the ability to have conversations that are, you are not living up or being and not being accountable to the rest of your team or to yourself in the amount of work product you are producing.
I know exactly where you're going with
that.
But so my family, like my family's consultancy, we were brought in to be able to affect culture change and facilitate levels of conflict resolution or constructive dialogue. And so it's wild, because in this day and age, everybody takes offense to everything. And so it becomes this PC culture where it just erodes your level of growth and success and culture and morality and just overall client experience. We always would preach a 5-paragraph order, which is a very military leadership structure for operational excellence. And so we would do our after action reviews, but in order for everybody to get on the same page, they had to be able to understand mission objectives, what are the tools, who's doing what, and then what went wrong. Otherwise, they died, right? Like, you literally die if you don't get it right. Your buddies die. Like, it's not a nice to have, it is a must have. And if client experience and growth and execution are your top priorities in the company, so that you can ultimately have an exit and everybody benefits from the exit, y'all gotta be on the same page around being able to take feedback and translate it so that we all grow together. So I love how you've positioned that.
Agreed.
I have some like rapid fire to sort of round out our conversation today. Are you ready? Well, we'll see if they resonate.
Let's go.
But okay, best growth channel right now.
Ooh. Depends on the company, naturally. Micro influencer is doing quite well. Especially with the changes to traditional. Post-endorsed radio, people overlook a ton. We did a ton there. So always look, as the digital guy, I always looked at the asymmetrical opportunities.
So I've seen that with the Don't Quit with the protein soda. Is that where we're diving into? Perfect. Just on that note, is that SPV still available? Are we still raising for that? If people are looking? Okay.
Still raising for Don't Quit. Yeah, still raising for Don't Quit. Would love to have conversations around. It's a great company to get involved in. They're doing fantastic.
My audience is very diverse. So if you want to speak to who would be a good fit for different types of companies that we're doing raises for, that would be amazing if you could break that down.
Yeah, so traditionally, these are private SPV deals. And so from a general solicitation perspective, we're invite only, right? We like having great conversations, making sure you're an accredited investor, you meet those needs, right? Those hurdles. And then from there, this is a great company where you look and you say, look, I believe in what their strategy is. I believe when and how they're going to exit. And I believe that the return profile matches the risk profile, right? Because these type of investments naturally aren't market correlated, right? And they're illiquid. So you're making investments saying, I believe that over the next 5 years, there's going to be that type of return. When you look at now, what does that look like from an investor perspective? They really run the gamut. It's people who, again, are called to this product. They're called to this opportunity. They're called and they see this as something being meaningful. And the modern soda category is growing, and it's growing really heavily. Don't Quit has put themselves in position to be an amazing kind of first in market protein soda, and have garnered attention from the largest retailers in the country. So they have this, first mover advantage mixed with a delicious product, mixed with unbelievable distribution coming up this year, that they're on a
I
absolute
think
rocket
I've
ship.
talked
It's
about
amazing.
protein soda more times in the last like 6 months than I could ever have imagined. Protein is a hot
Right?
topic.
Well, it's interesting because most people think about it, they're like, protein soda. Like, I don't get it. And you're kind of like, okay, but like, stay with me here. This isn't taste like your post-workout type protein. And what has come out, and everyone, if you don't know, please go do some research. But the number one thing people don't get enough of in their kind of macro nutrition is the amount of protein that they need on a daily basis. And so depending on if you're trying to gain weight, lose weight, or stay where you are, all determines how much protein you should be ingesting. And there's different schools of thought, but protein is protein, meaning just because it came in a post-workout shake or from a meat source, right? Protein source, doesn't make it necessarily any different on how it's going to work with your body. There's other things on other vitamins and minerals and other things, but just straight protein for protein. So, being able to have a delicious soda instead of, I'll use Fanta, having a orange protein soda from Don't Quit, you're getting an additional 10 grams of protein to add to your diet while still enjoying that sweet treat. And with the real push on GLP-1s and the real push on just being more protein conscious as part of a diet, people are looking for unique ways to supplement, right? You've seen that over the last 5 years. One of my favorite snacks is those Quest chips, right? Which are protein chips. They're amazing. I would have never thought of eating protein potato chips, but they're delicious, right? And so there's one of those, like, I'm looking for ways to get protein in my diet that isn't trying to chew on another chicken breast or drink another protein shake. And so being able to have something that you maybe naturally already have as, in your life that day, is a really unique way of doing it. And so that's what's really resonated. And especially, and I don't want to get into talking necessarily about the kids side of it, but if a mom's making a decision on whether or not we go back to that sugary drink versus one with no sugar and 10 grams of protein, it's probably going to be an easy decision.
And the rebrand. Sorry, I know I was supposed to go rapid fire, but we're going to go down that rabbit hole. The rebrand is what is it called? Sky Pop. Sky Pop is so.
Sky Pop, yeah. Did that for retail. It really it works more in the modern soda set than Don't Quit did. Don't Quit was built out of a athlete's mentality,
which I love.
Right.
So
back to the former athlete side, And so, and really with, Damar Hamlin, who's a big spokesman for the company and involved, his story resonated with it as well, right? It's all of the things. And where it started was really kind of energy drinks as well as post-workout, I'll call them typical protein shakes, cookies and cream, chocolate, vanilla, things like that. And what they did was innovate a new way of making a soda with protein. And so they brought that to market last year. And
I'm excited
really
to see where
off.
that company goes for sure. Okay, next question. Are you ready? All right, one marketing myth you wish would die. Okay.
This one's big to unpack.
That's okay.
But I will be quick. Sorry.
This is what we're here for. Unless you got meetings that you got to go to.
No. There's so many things. And I remember my agency days when I had mine. And I remember even sitting with executive teams and having conversations. There's an old saying someone much smarter than me came up with. I know my advertising's working. I know 50% of my advertising's working. I just don't know which 50%.
That's funny.
Right? And so there's this level of the Venn diagram between growing brand and growing direct response, meaning physically getting a sale, last click attribution, things on media models. But it's where one starts and one stops. And I think that too many people say, if I spent $1, I need $1 back. And while I go, yeah, of course, we want to be good stewards of budget, there's a bucket of those dollars that regardless are helping build and establish your brand in places, right? So if you go make XYZ organic content, it may lead to a sale, but it may be one touch on a full customer journey that without would erode your advertising click-through rates and final conversion. And I think that tie we've gotten a lot better at. I can remember building, with my team, data warehouses for companies back in the day to try to reconcile all of those attribution touches ourselves. It's gotten a lot better now over the last, 8 years. Trying to say if I had a piece of content that I developed 2 years ago that's still getting views, do we attribute part of the sale or conversion to that? Because I can see that it was viewed, I can see that it was interacted with, but the sale took place a week later.
Yeah.
2 weeks later. But we negate it and say it didn't do anything.
Except it's the brand story.
So how do I do the through line of the journey?
Interesting. Are there measurables for that? Or is that more just anecdotal at that point where we have to? So I'm taking this back to welding for oil and gas. You've got the measurables and the immeasurables when it comes to the quality of a weld. So it's essentially the same thing where you're having to quantify it without, it's more of a qualitative side of it.
It is, but then being able to try to assign a quantitative measure to it.
Fascinating.
And so the idea being, and again, I've had these conversations throughout the years and they go many different ways, but a customer spends $50,000 a month, generates sales, and they're like, we need more. And you're like, yeah, got it. Don't get me wrong, right? Generated you more as a positive return on ad spend. And they're like, yeah, but it's not matching this. And then what they realize when they turn it off, sales in all the other channels go down. And so there's this level of it works together and it has to work together. And some dollars aren't treated equal. We used to, talk to clients about building opportunistic buckets, right? Saying this is not going to do anything that you can directly measure, but it's going to help everything else. And we'll show you how that works. And so more, I think to streamline it, the myth is that all marketing dollars are treated equally. And 2, well, look, I'll just leave it there. Not all dollars are treated equally.
Whichever rabbit hole we want to go down. Okay, one more question. What's the most expensive mistake you see early stage founders make?
Going too wide, too fast. So the difference between being an inch wide and a mile deep versus an inch deep and a mile wide. The great thing about founders is as I go back to our P.T. Barnum conversation earlier, right? This magic whatever can do things for everyone, every industry, every human that walks the earth, right? Usually when they start that company, there's an endemic audience or there's an actual physical vertical that they know better than anything else. And that's where they start. But then someone tells them, it also work in healthcare. It also work over here. It works for body shop. And so they try and do it for everyone. And what you don't necessarily realize is the costs associated with penetrating a market that you don't understand. And so what always worries me is when I go through with founders, the TAM or the addressable market, and it's everyone in the world, I go, got it. I want to see that you know how to service 1 or 2 verticals or industries really well and why this is the no-brainer fix while you are penetrating those and showing you can do it. And there's market appetite for that, right? Understand what it's going to take to win that next market because you may not know contract length, who holds the actual right keys to the castle and unlocking those deals. You don't know how long the sales cycle is, so you spin up a team, rebuild a solution for a new vertical, and then you realize we're not going to be in revenue or in any kind of operating income for 18 to 24 months. What does that drain look like when you could have been just using that same capital, time, and opportunity cost inside the verticals and going deeper and penetrating harder? And that's typically what we see as being the biggest kind of waste by time and by capital.
Yeah.
Too wide, too fast.
Amazing. Okay. As we wrap this up, I always like to, so for me, I always like to ask, what's your mission? What do you want to be known for? Me, I always say, I always want to be known for the golden rule. Everything that I touch, I leave better than how I found it. So I'm curious if you have a motto that you like to live by that you want to be known for.
Yeah. It's something I learned from my dad a long time ago, and it carries through with everything, is add value to the people you truly care about without any expectation of anything in return. So I think it's pretty analogous to what you're saying on the golden rule. But for me, the end of the statement is you'll realize so many years later, you're standing on the shoulders of thousands of people. And as a visual learner, for me, I'm going, okay, if I get up every day and try to add value to our investors, try to add value to our portfolio company CEOs, to my community, to whatever it might be, right? And expect nothing in return. By proxy, you can call it karma, you can call it whatever you want. Everything will work out from a positive perspective, right? And so that's really it, is getting up with that mindset every day and delivering value. If you can do that, the rest of it
amazing.
takes care of itself.
Well, where can people find you? Where can investors touch base with you? How do they connect?
So the quick would be email. It's just C Van Dusen, right? C and then my last name at selecocapital.com. LinkedIn and Instagram are the same. Chris M. Van Dusen.
Thank you so much for being a part of this episode of The Pursuit of Excellence, the show where we go beyond the surface to discover what separates the good from the great.